All right, here we go, and welcome everybody, and good afternoon. This is our third week of Relax, Focus, De-Stress, and Connect. I'm Bud Wassell, and if you may have been with me the last couple of weeks where we focused on focus and relaxing, today's probably one of the more popular ones in a sense, talking about stress and the various ways that we can deal with the stress. I think so many of us are under many different forces of stress. And just to start off with saying, not all stress is bad, and a lot of it has to do with how we view stress and our beliefs and thoughts about stress. So part of our class today will be zeroing in on that. And then next week is our last week, and we're going to be talking about connection and how important relationships are. And there are a lot of research studies that bear this out as well. So I try to base a lot of this on evidence and the studies that are out there. So let's get started. I think I have you all muted just to cut down on any background noise, but please feel free to use the chat as we go along, and or if you want to speak up, that's okay too. We're at about 22 at this point. You're able to do that as well. So, and there's my contact info. And if you wanted to follow up with a question later, please feel free to reach out to me on email. I'll be happy to get back to you. All right, so let's dive into this. The first thing I want to do is remind you about the Employee and Family Resources Program, because this is a great resource for stress in a variety of ways. Now, you can use the counseling part of the program. There's up to 6 sessions at no charge. And of course, if you're dealing with a lot of stress, you can actually, in fact, stress is one of the more common issues that people use the program for. But you could talk to one of our counselors and just say, hey, look, I want to deal better with stress, and come up with your own personalized stress management plan. So that's a great way to do that. There are also work-life resources, because there's a variety of situations that might stress you out: elder care, child care, just other things that we all deal with, so they can help you find resources. And then there's critical incident stress response that we do. So if there's sort of a traumatic incident that occurs in the workplace, we can respond to that. So keep us in mind for that. And then, of course, legal and financial issues are also very stressful. And then that web address there has really a lot of content. So you might want to check this out if you haven't already. You can go on to this website on any device, doesn't have to be a hospital device. And there are really great resources. If you see on the home and you can scroll down, there's usually featured topics. We have our guided meditations on there, and they have all kinds of different topics that you can look into that are stress related and family related. And I mean, there are just umpteen different focus areas to go into. So check that out. It's really a great resource if you like reading or doing some webinars. There are on-demand webinars, there are quizzes and other resources and articles. And like I said, very content rich. You might not know about the life cycle kits, and these are free through the program as well. And as you can see, the different life events, and some of these are stressful. And there is one actually focused on stress management. And if you want to read a little bit more about what's in each of those kits, you can go to that same web address, the Carillon Wellbeing. And you'll see on the homepage, there's a link for that. And it just brings up what's in the actual kits. Now, to get one, you do have to call the EFR number. You see that toll-free number there, because they do want to do a quick consult with you and to see if there's any ways that they can help with other things that are going on, or if there's other services that they can provide to you and your family. Just to give you an idea, the Stress Management Kit has a couple of really good books in it, and then a Nature Mood CD. That's a little outdated. Lots of folks aren't using CDs anymore, but then there's a coloring book with colored pencils, if you like that kind of a thing. And then caregiver support, of course, is a very can be a very stressful situation. So there's a whole kit on that as well. All right. So those are the kits available. So feel free. You're eligible to get one per person throughout the year. I know there's plenty of available. So please feel free to call the program to do that. All right. So I see a number of you saying hello to each other, and that's great. I do present a lot of information here, and unfortunately, it doesn't give a lot of opportunity for like if we were in a classroom, for example. Zoom does make it a little bit different. So yeah, that's great. I encourage you to kind of connect with others and say hi, and maybe come up and get a stress buddy. I often recommend getting a mindfulness buddy to help us do some of these practices, and so I like to see that. That's nice. So let's start with this. Let's just think of assessing your stress level like right now. What's it been like the last few days? There is a link here, and there is like a stress related quiz that you can take on that same website. That's where this takes you. And again, I'm going to send these slides out so you'll have all the links and the phone numbers. And anybody who registered on LMS, I have the list, the roster, and I have your email addresses, so that's how I'm going to send them out. If you didn't, for some reason, register on LMS, let me know either through the chat or send me an email, and I'll make sure that you get added to that once I send it out. All right, I see some of you are putting numbers in already. That's great. I was going to say, yeah, so rank yourself 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest level of stress, 1 being no stress at all. Okay, so and just kind of interesting to see where folks are landing. And I see it just right off the bat, a number of you are kind of on the high level. There's a couple on the lower level, a few right in the middle. Somebody mentioned fighting an illness that can be extremely stressful. So, all across the board, but I think it's probably pretty high overall. And there's no mystery in that, the way things are going these days, not only at work, but in our home lives, and as well as just in the world around us. My dog is barking in the background, so if you happen to hear that, I apologize. The FedEx driver just came up, and so he's not being very welcoming to him. So sorry if you hear my dog in the background. So what I'd like you to do is keep that number in mind. We're going to try a few things, and then at the end, you might want to redo that. And hopefully you can see what has been helpful to you in this session today, and try some of those things in the next few days or the next week, and see if it makes a difference, and maybe continue to rate yourself on that scale of 1 to 10, and find out what works for you. That's really what it comes down to. All right. So the question is, how can we get better at stress? And there are actually studies that show we can learn. It's a skill to learn stress management techniques, to learn how to get better at dealing with stress. So it's difficult, though, because many of us are facing so many different stressors. And I just listed a few here that you might relate to. But to me, some of the big ones, and we've covered a couple of things, are things like distractions and information overload. Time poverty simply means that many of us feel like we don't have a lot of time on our hands, and so there's no time to do the kinds of things that help us. We're always kind of rushing and hurrying from one thing to the next, and we just don't have the time. And so what I, again, hope to do is give you a few quick little things to try, as well as some more larger scale kinds of techniques that you might try to overcome and do some of these kinds of things. If you're in a clinical position, this last point here, getting emotionally involved with patients, or just in any job, really, we get emotionally involved in our teammates and the work that we're doing and whatever it might be. So that's another additional stressor. But if you're working with patients, you might be feeling some compassion fatigue or even secondary traumas. If the folks that you're working with are going through trauma, you're witnessing that with them. You're, honoring and being close to that, and so you're going to feel some of that. So that's another additional stressor. So we all have our own things, and I like to kind of say, well, instead of like folks, a lot of stress management focuses on looking at what those stressors are. You probably already know what they are. I like to focus on what are some solutions, what are some easy, quick techniques that you can do. So I'm going to try to give you some of those today, and we'll do a couple of practices as well. But this is just a simple graph that kind of shows that we all have, in a typical day, many stressors. And whenever a stressor occurs and we get triggered, we kind of feel that fight or flight response. And that's what this graph shows. So, lots of different stressors happen, and this is our distress level. It goes up. The relaxation level is down towards the bottom. But usually what happens with multiple stressors is we begin to feel pretty anxious and tense and emotionally overwhelmed, right? And so by the end of the day, our level is right up here. And if you were to do that 1 to 10 again, maybe it increases from a 4 or a 5 up to maybe an 8 or a 9. And so what can you do? So the very simple way to kind of conceptualize it is whenever one of those stressors happens, to do something. So rather than letting this kind of take its natural course and just, I think we kind of all get very accustomed to just being with the stress, and it becomes our normal way of feeling as we go through the day. What we can do is to counteract it is bring on what's called the relaxation response. And so these are very simple little techniques. And if you've been in many of my classes before, we do a number of these, and there's lots of things. So I'll give you a few examples in just a moment. But the basic idea is to learn to get into the habit of pausing throughout the day, so that when those spikes of those stressors happen, and as you're feeling stressed out, you do something each and every time by simply pausing. It doesn't mean it has to be, a long pause. You can even do some of these things in 30 seconds to a minute or two to bring on that relaxation response. And I put this in here. The value of this time off depends in part how well we can separate ourselves from our work, if that's the thing that's stressing you. So you might rephrase that by simply saying, how well can we detach ourselves from the stressor? Okay. And I like this quote: almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. So kind of like our devices that we always have trouble with. We just unplug them, and they often work again. So here are some quick pauses. We did some of these in the first class on relaxation and, deep breathing, for example. 3 breaths for a pause is a very simple. The first breath is feel the breath itself. The second breath is feel the body. Feel into the body. Get out of the head into the body. Feel what the body feels like. Feel the body anchoring you. And then the third breath is to be kind to yourself. And so you can do this literally in 30 seconds. 3 long, deep breaths, feeling the breath, feeling the body, being kind to yourself. Hand washing, Purelling, daily tasks, those are examples of informal mindfulness. In other words, paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it, rather than letting the mind kind of spin off into the what ifs and kind of getting swept away by what's going on in your stress. And again, we'll talk about interrupting those cycles. And then the last one, which we'll try a little bit in one of our exercises, is visualizing a peaceful place. And you can go there, and do a peaceful place or a peaceful person or a peaceful thing like a music or nature or flowers or something like that. And you can use that visualization again to get out of the head and just use it to visualize. Some people like the sort of the images of being able to find a peaceful place and learn to de-stress doing that. Again, we'll practice that. The hand is, if you remember, we did the hand, I think I did this. It's a very simple technique of you trace your hand by you put your hand in front of your face, and then you, as you go up, you breathe in, and you trace from down all the fingers. You breathe out, breathe in. You can do this with me if you like. Breathe in, do it kind of slowly, breathe out. So we're regulating our breath. Breathe in, breathe out, and just keep doing that till you get all the way to the other side. And this really does two things. Now you can go back if you have time as well. This regulates our breathing, so it helps us, again, slow down, slow the breath down. Usually when we're stressed, our breathing is more rapid and shallow. But it also gives us that tactile sense and helps to ground us a little bit. So any kind of grounding technique, getting out of the head again into the body, can help us a little bit with not getting caught up. Same thing with that image of the feet in the sand, another grounding technique. Feel your feet grounding you wherever. Being on a beach would be nice, right? But even if you're just taking a walk on a cold day, just feeling that contact that your feet make with the ground. Another good way to kind of ground yourself. What it comes down is to experience peace does not mean that your life is always blissful, but it means that you're capable of tapping into a blissful state of mind amidst the normal chaos of a hectic life. And I think most of us have pretty hectic lives, right? And there are so many different stressors that we're going through. And all this really means is that the more we train ourselves to find that peaceful place quickly and easily, the better at it you're going to be, even when you're having one of those crazy hectic days. And that's the key, because those are the days that are really exhausting physically and emotionally. So you need to practice this stuff on some of the less stressful days. You need to try doing some of these simple little techniques. And again, I want you to try to see what works for you. It might be breathing, it might be anchoring, it might be whatever. I'm going to give you a few more to try, but see what works for you and practice that one or two simple techniques. And that can be your ticket, in a sense, to finding that peaceful place. Now, a lot of stress management classes talk about these kinds of things, and I'm not really going to go into them other than to mention the obvious stuff. They do work. Getting plenty of exercise, we know, is a good stress reliever. Eating well, of course, will help us. These are all cornerstones of stress management. Getting good sleep. If we're not sleeping well, obviously we're going to feel more tired, more fatigued, less calm, more irritable, all those kinds of things. This is a link, by the way, that takes you to a quick little video by Dr. Judd Brewer on sleeping when you're anxious. He's got a bunch of great stuff out, including a good book on unwinding anxiety. And so anyway, there's a couple of other tips there. And then limiting habits that don't help, doing more of what does. So trying to identify what do you do already kind of naturally? What are the kinds of things you do that help you with the stress? What kinds of things give you that sense of joy and fun? What do you do for recreation? And maybe you've let some of those things go. We've all kind of been challenged in the last few years for a variety of reasons. Or maybe your life circumstances have changed and you don't have as much time to connect with other people or to exercise or to get out into nature. So think about those things that you used to do. Um, Music is another good example, or any creative endeavor, and you don't have as much time. How can you find a little bit of time to get back in touch with that, to put a little bit more of that fun and recreation back into your busy life? Other things that are important that we'll talk a lot more actually in the next session about reaching out to others. It's all about connection and compassion and friendships and good relationships. But that again comes out very, very clearly in the research that the support that we get from others, the support that we give and we receive is so important. So again, you might find a buddy, maybe a buddy from this class. You might find somebody to touch base with and talk about how you're dealing with some of the stresses that you're going through, especially if you're in similar circumstances. So that's why support groups work, right? People get together who are going through the same kinds of things, and they get practical tips, but they also get emotional support. Now, that term strategic support group, all that really means is that when we're going through something, say you're in a work group and there's lots of difficulties and challenges, and people tend to already get together and talk about it, right? And commiserate. And that can be very helpful. It can be helpful to just kind of offload some of those negative feelings. But here's the trick, and this is where we get caught up. If we continue to focus on the negative parts of those stressors and what's usually what the things that we cannot control, it and if we kind of get caught in that groove of negativity, it usually ends up that we're feeling worse about it. So the trick is that at some point towards the end of your support session, try to come up with what are a couple of positive steps that you can take. And if it's something that you can't control, that overall stressor, what can you do in response to that to change how you are responding to it, right? So that's really important to kind of try to come up with a positive strategy and maybe brainstorm that with some of the others. Getting out into nature, again, lots of studies show how important that is. So whatever is good for you, try to do more of that. That can be a very helpful strategy.
Bud,
Yes.
I've been hearing forest bathing. What exactly is that?
Okay, let me go back to forest bathing. So I have an article on this actually. Forest bathing is comes from a Japanese practice, and basically, as I understand it, what it comes down to is that when you go out into nature, you're bathing in the forest. In other words, you're really mindfully getting in touch with the colors, the sounds, the smells, using all your senses to immerse yourself in the forest. So you could really do this anywhere, and a walk in the neighborhood. You can mindfully do that walk, maybe slow down a little bit, pay more attention to again those various senses, the sensory experience of it, and just kind of just really immerse yourself. Now, a lot of us, we tend to think, and I'll be talking about this in a few minutes, that's going to happen. So when your thoughts carry you away from the actual contact that you're making with the forest, just bring yourself back and to reconnect with the sensory experience.
Great, thank you.
And yeah, you're welcome. And please, thank you for speaking up. And if anybody has any other questions, I'll pause right here. Any questions at all so far about anything I've kind of touched on? And again, you can use the chat. Let me check that out. Somebody can't hear. No, that's not good. Can everybody hear me?
Oh no, that was we couldn't hear your dog.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I could. It was annoying me, but that's part of it. We all have those kinds of distractions, and that's kind of the trick of it, is not to let them really annoy you. But we'll get into that. All right. So many of you know that I teach mindfulness, and I think one of the most effective skills is learning to be present through mindfulness kinds of activities. First of all, it can help to relax and calm ourselves. It can get us out of a busy thinking mind into our bodies. It can really just help us relax. And we're going to do a practice in just a minute that we'll try some of that. It helps us get out of autopilot. And what I mean by autopilot simply is, when you're driving from one place to another and you get to where you're going and you can't even remember how you got there, you can't remember the turns because your mind was on autopilot, and it was kind of like, swirling around with all the problems and concerns of the day. Um, Autopilot is typically where your mind wanders to when you're not focusing on a task. So mindfulness is the opposite of autopilot. Mindfulness gets us into a state of just being in the moment, but without getting caught up into all that craziness, all the monkey mind that kind of goes on. And we talked about last week, it can help us increase our focus and concentration. And next week, we'll talk more about the compassion and connection. So with this image, I thought we might just do a simple little exercise, maybe take a few minutes to stabilize a little bit with the breath to help relax ourselves a bit. We'll use the breath, we'll use a little bit of anchoring, and then we'll finish with a little bit of visualization. So this image for me is a place in Maine where I've been to, and this kind of an image for me brings that up. So you might, once we get to that point, you might think of a place or a person, or could be anything really that brings up a feeling of peace for you. And again, when we get to that part of the practice, you can choose whatever you want, but there may be several things, and you can try a couple of different things. But to start with, just start by sitting in a comfortable position. Now, if you've been kind of working busy all morning and you're kind of feeling tense already, you might consciously do a couple of shoulder rolls. You might relax the jaw a little bit. You might stretch out the back. You might do a couple of simple, easy, gentle stretches to begin to release a little bit of tension. And then just let your body settle. And you can close your eyes if you like, but you don't have to. If you'd rather not, you can keep your eyes slightly opened. But just find a way to kind of be able to turn inward and let your body come into a feeling of stillness. But also, I want you to be relaxed, but also alert as we go through this. And we're going to start by feeling ourselves anchored in the body. So all you have to do is be aware of the body in its position. I'm assuming you're probably sitting, so feel the chair beneath you, feel the support that the chair gives you. Allow the weight of the body to sink into that chair a little bit more. Feel that sense of touch and pressure and contact. And you might notice that in the lower part of the torso, the sit bones, the lower back. And you might also feel your hands and arms resting comfortably. So just feel into that for a moment. And then the other place is to feel your feet. Feel the sense of touch and connection your feet make with the ground. Okay, and that's all different ways to kind of anchor or ground ourselves. And, your mind is going to still be thinking, and that's okay. We can't stop the mind from thinking, but when we're trying to anchor ourselves and we have a busy mind and there's lots on the mind, just keep refocusing back on that anchor. And then we'll also feel the breath. So just feel the breath the way it is in a natural cycle, feeling the in breath and the out breath. And now take a couple longer, deeper, fuller breaths. We did more of this in the first session, but basically we're just slowing the breath down, making that exhale longer than the inhale. As we exhale, let the body release a little bit more tension. And as we do that, again, let the muscles relax anywhere that you might feel a little bit of tension. So again, shoulders, letting the shoulders soften, the muscles in the face and the jaw, and wherever you feel a little bit of tension, let those areas soften and relax. So you sort of feel really soft, almost like, I don't know, jello or something like that, soft or fuzzy, or just let the whole body relax. And again, just breathe and feel your breath now at its natural rate. And anytime a thought pops up, anytime that you get distracted, the practice now is simply to return to the breath or to the body. Don't get caught up in the thought. Don't allow that to happen. Just keep refocusing on the breath and or the body. Now imagine that as you breathe, your breath is like a warm tropical breeze. And imagine the breath is soothing your whole system, your whole nervous system. Every breath comforting your emotions, quieting your mind. And now we'll come to that peaceful place. So I'd like you to bring to mind, if you can, or just think of a peaceful place or a peaceful person or a peaceful thing. Maybe it's something in nature or a flower. We've got spring flowers coming out. Maybe it's a song. Maybe it's a nice relaxing place like a warm bathtub. Doesn't really matter. Just try to come up with some peaceful place or image, something that brings you that sense of peace. And as you get that, just stay with it. Kind of paint the picture in your mind's eye and allow yourself to be there with that peaceful image, or person or thing. And just take a few moments to just relax with that image. No place to go, nothing to do. Nobody's asking anything of you in this moment. Just relax and enjoy it. Now, if we can, we're going to just let that expand a little bit. So see if you can let that feeling expand in the body, almost like you're filling up a bathtub with water. And as you continue thinking of that peaceful place or person, just imagine that feeling getting bigger and spreading inside of you even more, filling up your whole entire body, gently washing through the body and the mind. And if you want, even just letting it spread even on a wider sense beyond the body. So kind of encompassing yourself in this peaceful feeling, in this peaceful image, this peaceful bath in a sense. You're bathing in it. And just rest for a moment before we close. Notice what that's like. And remember that you can come back to this place or image or person, or you can experiment with different ones anytime you like. But again, that's the idea, is to try it a few more times so that you get good at it. And when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can open them up. As we finish, you might want to stretch again a little bit and just sort of notice what that all feels like right now after having done that simple little exercise. We use a little bit of anchoring, we use some breath, we use that image. So you could break those up. And if there's one thing that particularly you liked, try that. Do that in some of these purposeful pauses throughout the day. So yeah, any feedback? I see. Great, good. Any other feedback about what that was like for you? Earthing sandals help. Great, excellent. Good suggestion. Very relaxing. Very good. Yeah. So yeah, continue putting in some comments if you'd like about what that was like for you. And it still might have been difficult, perhaps, if you've got a lot going on. Maybe the mind was still pretty active. And this next part of the presentation today is this is the chronic stress equation. All those little stressors that we've been talking about so far, they do pile up and they kind of get very burdensome. But here's the problem. So you take a stressor or a bunch of stressors, and what makes those result in a chronic state of stress. And this is where we get into more serious stress. It's harder to kind of counteract that. Exercises like we just tried are going to be, you can still do it, but it's going to be harder to overcome this. What gets in the way is our mind. Basically, we begin to ruminate, or we get self-critical, or we get stoic when we start to think, we start to push it away, we start to ignore it. And that's not helping at all. So all of this part of it is to begin to recognize and to be aware of when it's beginning to feel like this. Well, hopefully not quite this bad, but maybe the first third of it, when things starting to pile up and our mind is becoming, really full, and we're starting to ruminate or obsess more. And of course, all those thoughts are also associated usually with difficult emotions, and they play out in the body. And so again, the mindfulness techniques are very helpful to all those areas. And so what I want to do in the last part of this is show you some ways that we can work with our thoughts, because as Mark Twain said, our life has been filled with my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. And, I think we can all relate to this, the way things are in the world today. Without getting into details, I don't want to stress anybody out, but just think about all the difficult things that are going on in our world today. It's pretty easy to get caught up into those what ifs, what's going to happen down the road, all the awful and terrible things that could happen. But they haven't happened yet. They're out in the future, and that's really our mind's imagination running wild. So we can control that, and we can change our mind about those stressors. And there's a really good YouTube that I've talked about before, and if you haven't checked it out, here's the link. It's called How to Make Stress Your Friend. And basically, it talks about that we have thoughts and beliefs about stress that actually make that stress worse. And it's kind of like, to sum it up, is that if we have negative beliefs about all of that, all of what's going to happen, or if we focus on what has happened in the past even, and we keep ruminating on that, it's not those things in and of themselves. It's what we're telling ourselves. It's the story, it's the narrative, it's the thoughts and the beliefs that are swirling about, getting kind of out of control, that really contribute to that chronic stress and that really feeling of being unable to do anything about it. So I would encourage you to watch that TED Talk. It's about 15 minutes long, but it's really good. And it talks about how once we learn that we can get better at stress and that we can change how we perceive, and we can change rather than react to those stresses, we can change our own response to it, we can get better at it. And what they did in the study is they taught people how to get better at it. And they actually found that, yes, that once you learn some of these things and you learn how to change your thought processes and your beliefs about the stress, really can make a big difference in the outcome, not only in the mind, but in the body. And they showed that it actually made a difference in a person's cardiac response, for example. So check that out. And this quote from Epictetus: "We are not troubled by things, but by the opinions we have about things. That's where we get into trouble." And Viktor Frankl: "So between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Trick is, how do we find the space? Because stimulus and response happen very quickly. So where do we find this kind of space where we can find a little bit of place to breathe, to then say, wait a second now, I don't have to automatically react to the situation. I have a couple of different choices here in the moment." And again, with a little bit of mindfulness practice, we can learn to view some of those thoughts. And so what I'd like to do is, towards the end of this, is to give you one more little quick practice. And I'm going to ask you to, this time, instead of in the first practice, we looked at every time there was a thought, we came back to the anchor. This time, we're going to look at our thoughts a little bit more with some curiosity. And we're going to try to notice what those thoughts are doing. And I'll guide you through that. And I'm actually going to ask you to bring up something that's, maybe slightly stressful, and just see how that plays out. Nothing that's big, nothing that you're going to get up. I don't want you to get, too stressed out or upset, but something maybe mild to moderate stress. Okay. So again, finding a comfortable position, closing your eyes if you wish, letting the body be anchored and grounded and supported as you sit, taking a few deep breaths, again, helping to relax the mind and the body for a moment, bringing yourself into just simple mindful awareness. That's really all it is. There's nothing special that we're doing here. It's really fairly simple technique, just a few deep mindful breaths. Remember, it helps to make that out breath longer than the in breath. That's what brings on the relaxation response. Now that we've relaxed ourselves a little bit, bring to mind that stressful experience. Again, nothing big, something that makes you feel a little tense, perhaps. And when you bring that to mind, I want you to be aware of what your thinking is, what thoughts come up. And again, don't judge your thoughts, just notice what they are, okay? You might be thinking, oh, I don't like this, or it's uncomfortable, I want to get away from it. or what? Just notice what thoughts come up when you think about this stressful situation. And see if you can just be aware of the thoughts coming and going as mental events. The trick is not to engage with the thoughts, but to kind of step back, kind of like we did last week. The thoughts flow by like in a river, and they're just flowing by, and we're standing on the side, on the bank of the river, watching them flow by. We're not engaging with them, we're not fishing them up. We're just observing different types of thoughts. Maybe there's a worry thought, or maybe there's a thought where, oh, I could do this to fix that. Or why did they do that to me? Or whatever it might be. Or why am I being hard on myself? Sometimes those kinds of self-critical thoughts come up. Whatever it might be, just notice, don't try not to come up with any harsh opinions about them. You might notice a harsh opinion about it, giving yourself a hard time or someone else a hard time. Just notice that. And again, just kind of be curious about it. Just watch them come and go. And you might also be aware that they are often attached to an emotion, sometimes a difficult emotion or stressful emotion. And we can work with that as well in the same way. We can just notice those emotions. Just see if you can be with them for a moment or so without pushing them away, without needing to fix anything in the moment, just looking at them, noticing them, being curious about them. And then you might also notice perhaps they've shown up in the body, and maybe there's even feel a little tension as we focus on this. So now bring your attention into the body and see if you can feel where this shows up. Maybe there's some more tension in the shoulders or the belly or the back or whatever it is. With that, you can breathe into that area. You can anchor yourself. You can let it go. You can breathe in and then you can let it go away on the out breath, sort of releasing it. So what we're doing here is we're getting a little bit closer to it, and we're allowing it to be as it is, and we're gaining some insight into it. And what we might begin to notice that there are certain thought patterns that are repetitive, that happen a lot in our thinking, where there might be certain beliefs about our feelings and our thoughts that come up. And that's the value of doing this, is we become more aware of the kinds of thoughts, the kinds of emotions that automatically come up when stress arises. Now, just let all that go for a moment before we close. Just let go of that stressful situation. You don't even have to do anything consciously to breathe. Just rest for a moment. Just give yourself a break and just rest. And again, when you're ready, opening the eyes. And just notice again what that was like. And I would love to hear any feedback you might have about that. I have a few more slides we're going to talk about. I know we're really at the end here, but this really does have, this particular topic has a lot to it. And I will send the slides out, but the next part about this is really changing our negativity bias, which we all have, to a more positive mindset. And again, that takes some training, takes some work, it takes some techniques in a sense. And the biggest one that I know of is gratitude. And so we talk a little bit about, there are the benefits of gratitude, There's a whole link on our Thrive site from last year. We're going to be putting some new stuff up in May, but there's a whole 10 days of gratitude. There's a nice video on gratitude, but basically any of these gratitude exercises can help us turn that negative mindset into a more positive framework. And even simple little things like these pauses that I've listed here, great little ways to kind of turn our mind onto the positive and try to savor it a little bit. There's another practice called 3 Good Things that you might try. Very simple at the end of the day, just focusing on 3 good things that happened rather than what went wrong, what went right. What are 3 things that you noticed? Maybe jot them down, maybe share with somebody at home, maybe text somebody and just share them with somebody. But just focus on those at the end of the day. Again, we do have just some other resources to support these practices. Again, these will be in the slides. I'm going to zip through them kind of quickly. But there is an app, and there's a called M-Life. You can get that on the same website. There's a whole little course on reducing stress if you want to take this on-demand course. We have on that website that I mentioned up front a bunch of different resources that are stress related. There are other apps that you might try. All of these classes I put on a YouTube playlist, so that link takes you there. And we still have our phone meditations 5 days a week. And the point is, pick 1 or 2, 3 maybe simple things that you could try in the next few days and see if they work for you. Okay, don't take my word for it. Now, and then rate yourself again, and maybe even right now, give yourself another 1 to 10 scale. How do you feel? Did this stuff help? If not, what else, could you try? Hopefully you found a couple of things that might be helpful, and again, put them into practice and try them for the next few days and see if they make a difference. It's a lot, I know. So this kind of summarizes it. Simple stress plan is S is to stop, breathe deeply, ask yourself what you're feeling and thinking. P, do something physical every day. And then the 3 is plan and actually schedule 3 bright spots in your day. And that kind of puts it all together. Oh, this is kind of a quick bonus thing. I'm sorry, I know I've run over a bit, but I kind of had to put this in here just because of what's going on in the world. Simple little stress technique for world events. Take a pause, take those 3 breaths to pause, breathe in, feel the breath, slow down, breathe in for you, whatever you need in the moment. Maybe you need a little bit of peace or support or compassion. Breathe out for others, all those that you might worry about in the world or affected by all world events. And then feel your feelings, acknowledge and label them. Don't run away from them. And then you can take some action. Resource yourself, figure out what you need to do, what kind of a plan, and then put that plan into place. So just wanted to give you that kind of a little bit of a bonus. And that's basically it for today. I want to thank you very much for joining me. I know it's a lot. I tend to kind of cram too much into these. But if you have any questions, I'll once I stop the recording, I'll be around for a few minutes if you have any questions, or again, feel free to reach out to me later on. And again, thank you so much for being with me today. Stop the record.
Thank you, Bud, as always.
Thank you. Thank you all. There we go. Stop. Being finicky on me here.